Hi everyone, Armoured Pants here, and I have another review for you. This is a German line Tier 8 tank destroyer, premium tank destroyer, the Jg.Tig 8.8. And as always, we have a complete guide for you. Now, before we look at the tech spec, winblitzhanger.com, which is where we always look, and it's a great tool. I think it's important to note that this tank is historically iconic tank destroyer. It was the most heavily armoured and heaviest vehicle in World War II, produced by the Germans towards the end of the war. It was very much feared by the Allies. With a 128mm gun, really there was no Allied armour that could stand up to it, and it was a fearsome predator on the battlefield. The 88mm gun and the 105mm variations, which are on this Jg.Tig, are actually added in later on in the war, when the Germans were short of 128mm guns, and therefore they decided to use the more prevalent 88mm, and they also experimented with 106mm. What we're looking at here is the Jg.Tig in all its glory during World War II with the 128mm gun, which is actually the Tier IX tank destroyer in Blitz, and we'll have a look at that. Actually, there's a full review of that on channel 2. You can see here some American soldiers looking at a knocked out and captured Jg.Tig, and it really was, although limited numbers were produced, a very, very effective tank destroyer. And as I said, almost no Allied armour, in fact no Allied armour, could stand up to this battlefield monster. Now in Blitz, this Tier 8 is a very good premium tank. It has a 171% credit coefficient, which puts it in the top quartile of its tier. It costs 7,400 golds, therefore it's very good value at about €21, $25. And there are two gun options. There's an 88mm and a 105mm gun. Now, it says the 88mm gun has a better DPM, but I would recommend going with the 105mm gun for this reason. The theoretical DPM versus actual DPM is important to know. Theoretical DPM is basically average damage per shell by shells fired per minute. Simple calculation, but it assumes all shells penetrate, and we know that that's not true. Whereas actual shell damage is the actual shells that penetrate and the damage they do multiplied by the shells fired, right, that actually pen. So therefore non-penetrating shells are excluded from actual DPM. And if you have a higher caliber gun, a 105mm gun in this case, and it's more likely to penetrate. It also has higher muzzle velocity, which we will look at in a second, which also dictates that it is more likely to penetrate. Therefore the actual DPM on the 105mm gun is usually higher than the theoretical DPM on the 88mm gun, because it doesn't pen as much, particularly as you're Tier 8 and you're up against heavily armoured beasts in Tier 8 and Tier 9. The things that affect actual DPM are shell caliber, penetration numbers, muzzle velocity, and shell type you fire. And the formula that we've looked at before for armour penetration, this is the F formula developed by the United States Navy and then used in all of the armed services later on, shows that muzzle velocity is squared, therefore it has an exponentially more positive effect and greater likelihood of you penetrating. And that's why muzzle velocity is so key, and why I always say that we should use supercharge to get that muzzle velocity up, because it has a much greater effect on the possibility of penetrating. And of course that also affects the actual DPM. So therefore the bigger gun gives us more chance of penetrating, which gives us better actual DPM versus theoretical DPM. And that is quod est demonstratum, as they used to say in Latin, QED. Now, and that's mathematics, and mathematics is always greater than one's opinion, wins every time. So that's why I would recommend that we go with the 105mm gun as opposed to the 88mm gun. And if you're up tiered, by the way, you will definitely need that bigger gun. By the way, you do lose a little bit on the reload, but not much with the bigger gun. It's still less than 6 seconds, which for a 105mm gun, putting out big alpha rolls is really fantastic. You're going to do anything from 330 to 400 alpha rolls. We use supercharged and refined gun. Supercharge gets the muzzle velocity up to 1400 meters per second. By the way, the muzzle velocity is also better on the larger gun than it is on the smaller one. Another reason to use it based on the shell penetration formula that we looked at. Now, as I said, you don't lose that much. A less than 6 second reload on a gun like this in a tank destroyer is fantastic. And that of course allows you to have a lot of flexibility in the tactics that you use. And of course, if you miss a shot, it's not such a big deal as if you have a much longer reload. Now there's great traverse speed on this tank, and you'll see that in the game that we're going to look at. And the tank does 38 kilometers an hour, so on flat and in a straight line it's not bad, but it's not terrain friendly. As you can see here looking at the figures, you struggle a bit on different terrains. That said, you know, it is relatively quick and deceptively quick, and you can go and support your heavies and mediums, and we'll discuss that in a second. Now there's excellent frontal armor on this tank, and therefore it will bounce shots. You're going to be able to bounce shots in this tank, particularly if you're top tier, and you're going to see that in the game as well, where I bounce a huge amount of shots in this tank. If you wiggle it about the front, you can see that you're getting big relative armor numbers, really big, really high numbers, and that is going to allow you to bounce some shots. You can see on the sides, and you've got very good relative armor numbers too. So again, you're going to bounce shots, and you'll see one example of that in the game, where moving side on like that, creating an angle, I bounce a shot from across the valley in the Castilian map. But the sides on this are thin if you're side on and flat, and so is the back, and therefore you're going to attract HE shells. And as you are playing tier 8, you're going to be up against some big guns, Borsig, Waffle Tractor, T30, etc. if you are up tiered. Even the gun on a T34 or something like that is going to do a lot of damage. Now, you can run 2 repair kits, or engine accelerator is an option, and I would say that largely depends on how you want to play this tank, because there are few tactical options available to you with this tank or tank destroyer, and we'll discuss those in a second. As you can see here again, looking at the armor front on, it is a bully boy. Especially if you're top tier, you are going to have a good time when you're front on and bounce some shots, and steel wall badges will come. Now, in terms of tactics, using the muzzle velocity maximized with supercharge and refined gun to decrease long range penetration loss, you can play this as a classic TD, and we have a TD guide on channel which you should look at if you haven't already looked at, or perhaps even do so just to get a refresher. You can get into sniping positions with this and then use that rate of fire to farm damage. So that's classic TD style, sitting at the back supporting your team. Or you can move with your heavies or mediums to support them. As I said, because it does almost 40 kilometers an hour, it can keep up with the heavies and sometimes even the mediums. And you can do a supporting role. And if you can get that armor in front of the enemy and that DPM, you can go and farm a lot of damage, and it really helps support your meds or heavy tanks. And you can really make the difference about clearing a flank, capping, etc. Because this gun is really impressive and does a lot of damage. So there are sort of 2 different tactics you can use. So just to recap, you can do classic TD, sitting at the back from a sniping position, open up fields of fire, hope that your teammates spot up for you, and then you can farm some damage. Or you can move with your heavies or with your mediums and support them as they get up close and personal with the enemy. And this on Castilian map we're going to look at here, it was a supremacy game. I initially decided to, after looking at the setup, to go to A to support my medium tanks. And again, as we've discussed before, when playing tank destroyers, and sometimes I play tank destroyers as a medium, this kind of tactic often takes the enemy by surprise, because they're not expecting you to turn up at, let's say, base A here, supporting your meds and acting maybe as like a really heavy medium tank, and nobody's really expecting that, and then they can't really pen you front on. If your meds are with you, they can't get around behind you, and you can just use that gun to do a lot of damage. And we've seen that in the Jagdpanther 2 video I did, in the Jagdpanther video as well, and also in the Jagdpanzer 4 video I did, where I effectively just played that as a med on Winter Malankova. Now, I'm moving up, as I said, with the meds. I'm going to support them. As you can see, I fell behind them because the tank is not that fast, but not so far behind. And actually, this is a good position to be in, behind your meds. Let them spot up if anybody comes along. And you were able to sit at the back and you'll be able to support them well. I can fire down into A, and if anybody tries to push onto them, I can really farm some damage and hurt the reds. And as you saw, on a flat terrain, flat surface, paved surface, the tank moves pretty well, and although I wasn't as fast as the meds, I was able to keep up with them relatively well enough to be able to support them. Now, A is safe. my meds have capped it, so I am now going to move off to B. Two reasons for this. Firstly, I'm hoping maybe I can cap B, but secondly, C, I can see there's a congregation of reds pushing onto C. So by moving up this central part of the map, I'm actually able to open up fields of fire into the red team. And just as I come up here, you will see I'm going to move in a position and I'm going to go front on, and I'm able then to put in some shots. Fluff the first one, but I'm able to put in some shots and do some damage. Now, you'll see here bounce comes straight off, and this is again because I have the armour front on and at a slight angle, and we saw from the tech spec just how effective that is and how high those relative armour numbers can get, and we were able to really create a difficult target for the reds there. Now I am using this fast reload of mine to see if I can put in some more damage on them. And you see here, if we just look, this is exactly what I mentioned in the tech spec. Moving front on an angle, this is the side of the turret, let's say the side scraping angles that we created, and we see we get another bounce as I move forward. Really nice bounce, and actually I'm going to bounce a lot of shots in this game. We mentioned that if you're top tier, this tank will bounce a lot of shots, because when you're up against tier 7s, usually have smaller guns, etc., you are confident of the fact that you can bounce. But you're going to even bounce some shots off some big heavy tanks as well. You'll see a nice bounce coming up later on here against the VK100P, which has a very big gun and is quite an effective gun too. And you'll see that I get a bounce off that too. There you see the muzzle velocity at work, straight across through the barrel, straight across the valley and into that KV3. Now we see here, just look at how effective this gun is, right through the engine cowling on the back, straight in, nice damage, and then we actually able to get a nice bounce from the KV as well. I recently, we've been playing the KV3 a lot. I was doing some gameplay for a video which is coming up, although depending on when you watch this video, it may actually already be on channel. And I can tell you that the handling on the KV3 is atrocious. The gun handling is a pig. It's just awful. And I guess that comes then again to something we've discussed before about knowing the enemy tanks. I know that KV3 has dreadful gun handling, and therefore I was not in any way worried about him penning me across the valley and with that frontal armour that I have, and as you saw, I was able to bounce that shot there. And you know, this is again something we've discussed before about, you know, even if you don't play particular tanks, knowing their characteristics is important. It makes you a better player. Now I'm pushing down here because I want to bring this gun into play again. Here's the VK coming up here, nice shot into the side of him, get another bounce, and I get penned once. But I'm quite happy to do that. Now I'm back in position with the front facing up. And here I fluffed this shot, probably rushed it too much. I'm going to switch up to APCR for the next one just to make sure. And we can see here I get the bounce from the VK as well. And we know that the VK has a pretty big gun and it's pretty effective. Big bounce from him there because I'm straight onto him. He doesn't really have much to aim at. And then I'm able to clear him off. And that's him gone, and he's one of the more dangerous tanks. Now the RU is trying to get around behind me, which is what you should be doing in a light tank. You should be trying to get in behind a tank killer like this. But I block him so that he can't. Sort of Gandalf move there, thou shalt not pass. He's going to try to get up here again, and I'm going to push onto him and block him again, forcing him back. You know, also did a bit of ram damage, and then I'm just using my DPM here. I'm using that great reload, and I am bouncing shots left, right and centre from these guys. And you see here in this brawl just how effective this tank can be. You're a big tank, right? You're as big as a house, quite literally. This tank is massive, and as we said, it's the biggest tank that featured in the Second World War. And you can see here I'm sort of like a mobile chicane, and to use a racing expression. I'm just blocking his passage. He couldn't get up the side of the rock. Now he's trying to push past me here. I just move forward, you know, take a hit, but I don't mind. I've still got lots of hit points left, and bam, push into him. He can't get up. You know, he's not going to be able to push by me. I mean, I'm a big armored monster. And now he's back again in a very weak position. And that's just game over for him. He's screwed now. He just cannot get past me. He can't. He's having difficulty penning me because I'm front onto him. I've created an angle to the T20 as well. And that's making it very difficult for him to get shots onto me. Now push forward onto him, get another bounce. As you can see, over 2k of bounces right now. And cleared off them. It was a bit of a monster brawl, cleared them off, and there's a nice easy kill on the poor SP1C at the end. And that is game over. And you can see significant damage done, significant damage blocked. And as we discussed before, and there you see almost 3.8k of damage done. One of the game theories, one of the game philosophies I like to talk about is if you look at a game from a logical perspective, you have a total pool of hit points on one team, total pool of hit points on another team. When they reach 0, all things being equal, and obviously not in a supremacy game, but generally when they reach 0, one team loses, one team wins. If you block shots, not only are you keeping your own hit points conserved, you're also stopping your teammates being damaged by the enemy. Therefore, you're keeping the total level of your team's hit points higher. So therefore, you have a double whammy effect. Because any shot that's fired at you and bounces is a shot that could have been fired at the enemy and could have penned. So therefore, you are having an exponentially beneficial effect for your team. And that's why I would argue that if you look at the game in this model, shots blocked are as important as damage given, because you're conserving the total hit point pool of your team. So anyway, let's have a recap on the key points of this tank. It's a very, very good German tank destroyer. Frontal armor is great, really good, especially if you're up tier, especially if you're top tier and not up tiered, really good. The 105mm gun is an actual DPM monster, really good, and that less than 6-second reload is something special, as you saw in that game. The tank is not fast, but it's not as slow as you would think, and traverse is really, really good in it. And it's excellent as a traditional tank destroyer. You can just be a damage farmer in the back, go to that sniping position and really do well. But of course, you can, and if you're doing that, you should use a supercharger refined gun, get that muzzle velocity up to 1400 meters per second, which is really good, and use enhanced armor to get those bounces, because you want to create as difficult situation as possible for the enemy to pen you. Move the front of the tank when you're in brawling situations, create awkward angles for them, and you'll see just how many bounces that can be delivered when you do that. Engine accelerator is an option on this tank, but it's not required, and largely it depends on how you want to play. If you want to play it as a classic TD, you're not going to be up front with the enemy, get an engine accelerator. If you're going to be up front with the enemy, use 2 repair kits. Load up an HE for lights because you can pen them, and have fun, mix it up, surprise the reds. You can be a scourge of the red team, as I was there. You know, firstly went to support the meds, then went to B, capped, and then in the brawl there, I was just really causing all sorts of problems for the reds, and they were not happy at all. RU251 couldn't get past me, T20 couldn't pen me, so really had a very effective game by using the strengths of the tank. It is a good premium tank, 171% credit coefficient, and it is good value for money too. So if you like tank destroyers, think about it, it's well worth it. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it. Cheers mush and pants off.